The first thing we need to do is to set up a Telegram bot with which you can talk to N8N. So to set up a Telegram bot, you can go back into your first step and just search for Telegram and click on it. And here you can just go scroll down, and here you can click on message. So when you receive a message, that's what it means. So when you zoom in, you can see the window looks very similar to what you saw earlier. You have to go here and you have to select a credential. So like the last time, you don't have a credential for Telegram yet. I'm just going to show you how to make that credential in just a second. And over here on the trigger, you have different triggers. So you have a trigger for edited message, you have a trigger for a poll update, like polls that you can send, and you can pre-checkout query. You have lots of triggers, so we're not going to go into all the triggers right now. For this specific case, we are interested in just a message. So when we receive a message, we want this to be triggered. So you can go into the documentation and see all the different triggers if you're interested. And here's a webhook URL. So a webhook URL is a way to trigger this using a webhook. If you were to use a different application to do this trigger, you just have to call this webhook with specific data if you're using another app to send data to this Telegram trigger. And to create a credential, you have to say create new credential, and you need an access token over here. So how do you get this access token? So to create an API key, you need to go into the Telegram app and open BotFather. So if you just go search for BotFather, you'll find this account. And once you're inside, you can just go here and say start. And what that'll do is it'll show you all the different options that you have within BotFather. So you have all the different games that you can create, bot tokens that you can create. So in our case, we want to create a new bot. So just click on create new bot, and you can just give a name to this bot. So you can just call it, say, Hormozy 2 bot, because I already have a 1 bot. And now it's asking for a username. So username has to always end with bot. So I'm going to create Hormozy bot. That's it. So it will create a bot, and you can see that it says congratulations, and it gives an API key. So if you just copy this API key and paste it, copy this until this one, you can see it's clickable and it has a different formatting. Go back here, paste the API key and save, and that should enable this for you. I don't want this. I already have an API key, so I'm not going to do the last step. So once you have your Telegram bot, when you say test step and when you send a message, you will immediately get the message into the Telegram bot. So just like how we worked on the chat interface. So once I receive a Telegram bot message, so if I double click here, so I'm gonna deactivate this and I'm going to show you step by step on how this works. So I'm gonna test step, just the first step alone. And as you see, it says test workflow. And I can just go into my Telegram bot and say hello. And as you can see, it will test this, and the node got executed successfully, and only this step got executed because that's where I said test only step, not the whole workflow. So as you can see, it sent a bunch of information with this. So it sent the chat ID, it sent a date, the text hello, and like the from information and the update ID. So if you keep sending different messages, this information stays the same because who the message is from stays the same. The chat stays the same as well because it's one bot and we're typing it in one chat. So if you open a chat and into the same bot, then you will have a different ID for this chat. And we have the date and the text, and the update ID keeps changing depending on which message you send. Okay, so you have these additional fields, which is to download images and restrict to chat IDs, restrict to user IDs, which is just additional control that you have, but we won't need any of this for now. And as a second step, as you can see, there's an if statement. You can easily do that by just going here and just saying if and just selecting this if statement. So why are we doing if right now? So here's how it works, right? So you can send any video that you like directly to the Telegram bot, and you want it to transcribe that and go put it in the database, it does both things actually. So you can also ask a question on the YouTube video and it runs the schedule that I just mentioned. We are actually building both features. So let's say I copy a YouTube link. I'm going to test the workflow again. So it's waiting for a test event. So I'm going to go into my Telegram bot and I will paste this YouTube video. And you can see what would happen is it would go and go through a series of steps, which is to search the file and see if that file already exists. And then it's going to create a transcript and it's going to clean up the transcript. And then it is going to go paste that transcript, create some keywords around it. And then it's going to do a lot of stuff. We're just going to walk through all of this. And on the chat, you can see that it says processing your video. Please give me a few minutes. And once the video is complete, it will give you status updates after each step. So it generated keywords, it updated the keywords, and now it created a file. So now transcription was complete. It's storing it in a database, and now it's finally the video is stored in the database. So now my knowledge bank is constantly increasing as I keep sharing more videos. So this is what is happening. So what I'm doing here in the if statement is I'm detecting if my input text was a YouTube video or was it a question. So I can also ask a question over here. So let me test workflow again and go into my Telegram and ask a question, say, how do I get ahead of 99% of the people? And what it'll do is, as you see, the earlier time it went to the above if statement and now it goes to the below if statement and it gives me the answer to it. To get it ahead of 99% of the people, focus on embracing technology, self-improvement, and so on. So this answer, it pulls from what was in my database. So what this if statement essentially does is if it's true, it goes into the flow of taking my YouTube video, transcribing it, and putting it in the database. If it is false, which is just me checking if this was a YouTube URL or not. And if it's false, then it goes and answers the question, because if it's not a link, a URL, then it's a question. So then it goes and sends this to another AI agent, which answers the question for me. So how do I check if this is true or false? So if I go into my if statement, going back here, when I double click here, you can see that it has a condition. So if this condition is true, then it goes into the true path. And if this condition is false, it'll go into the false path, right? So if I execute this previous node, and what that is it's still waiting for an input, and I'm just going to go into the test event. I don't have anything over here. So let me stop this over here, and I'm going to go back and show in the example that I already built. So if I click here, you can see that I have this text that probably doesn't mean anything to you right now. And I have this matches regex, and then I type this whole random regex, right? So what I'm essentially doing here is I'm checking if the input is a link. So if you see, so the input, this is the value is the input, and you have to pass the value that you got from your Telegram over here, that will be your input, is URL. So how do you check is a URL? You go here, go to string and say matches regex. So regex is basically a pattern matching, and it is basically a logic with which you can tell if the input text has some characters or not. So you could go into ChatGPT and you can say write regex statement to check if the input string is a URL, right? So if you write that, so you generates this little bunch of text. So here it says regex here's a regex pattern that you can use to check if a string is a valid URL or not. So you copy this, you go over here and you just paste it as the value. So for the input, what you can do is you could just go and select the text. So you can see all the input that I just received from the Telegram message, right? So I'm inside schema, and from within schema, what you can do is just take this text and just go drag it and just go drop it here, right? So now it shows red because I screwed it up. There was already something before. So I'm going to delete this and I'm just going to go take it and drag it over here. That's it. So when I drag it, there's this little button tab over here. So expression, make sure it's an expression, because if it is fixed, it just is a plain text. So what we are doing is using a variable, a reference. So it's referring to the input, and this input dynamically comes from Telegram. So that's why it appears green. If there is nothing over here, it will appear red, or if you make a mistake, it'll appear red. So that's how you know it. So here's a tip: anything inside double quotes, double braces is a JavaScript. So this is basically JavaScript. So if you want a little more detail on what is exactly happening, usually the dollar symbol followed by JSON is the topmost information that you have. So this is the most information that you have. And when you have dot message, so anything that follows a dot is just something that traverses through the JSON. So within dot message is where you would go access the information inside the message, and within message you're accessing the information called text. So this is the whole JSON within this curly brackets. So that's a bit of a JavaScript. So if you want to understand JavaScript in detail and objects in detail, you can go look it up on ChatGPT and that'll help you. So now, because this text is not a URL, so on the right, you can see the true branch and the false branch. So the true branch has obviously no output. The false branch is where the output exists, which is basically the condition that this is met. So we have the text that is not a regex. So in the false branch, what it does is it simply passes the data. It passes everything that it got from the Telegram trigger for it to continue on the flow. So because nothing goes in the true branch, the false branch is where the action goes. So in the false branch, you have a processing message search. So what this is, it's basically I'm just gonna go here and I'm gonna copy this and I am going to paste it over here. And in the false branch, I can go and say Telegram, and I can select Telegram and I can say send a text message. So we want to send a text message back to Telegram and say, look, we understood that it's a question, and give some kind of a loading state. So within Telegram, again, select your credentials, you can select your message and you can say send operation, send message. That's what we're going to do. And here are a couple of fields, right? Chat ID, text, and reply markup. So let's do that. So if you go into the Telegram bot, and I'm going to double click this, we want to send a message, right? Or you can send a file, whatever callback that you want to do. We want to do message as the resource and send message as the action. And you have plenty of actions, like you can also send a photo, send a sticker, send a video. You can make it interactive as you want. And over here, we're just saying that we're sending a text that says searching your database. So this is where the message that you send back, which is what I got over here. See, searching your database. And now this part you don't need for now. You can go into the documents to see additional interface options and what this does, but this is not relevant for you. So I'm going to select append N8N attribution, which is another field, and I can go disable this. What that will do is, as you can see, that this message was automatically sent with N8N. This is a setting in N8N just to differentiate between what was an automated message and what was a message that is directly from a person, in case there is a person in the loop. So I can disable this, and basically what that will do is just go send a message directly back to Telegram saying searching for your database, and this is your message, right? Again, sends 2 data points. When you run the step successfully, you can also test the separate step. The first data point is just saying, okay, it's true. And the second data point is the result of this, which is essentially the same data that it passed on, along with this one text field that says searching your database. So the next thing we have to do is to build an AI agent. So this is the part that is the most interesting one, right? So what we're going to do is, when you go and create an AI agent, you can see that within the AI agent, first I want to define a prompt, right? So let me go here, and within the AI agent, so you can see that I have an agent prompt. So there are different types of agent. So in this case, we are going to use a tools agent. Why? Because we have a tool available. So if you select a different agent, you would not have that option. So basically there are different kinds of agents depending on the type of task. For most things, tools is all you need. But in some cases, if you want the agent to do a step-by-step problem solving, go back and forth. If it's a thinking agent, you probably would want to use a React agent. So you could, depending on what kind of task you want your agent to do, you can select. So if you're building something like an agent CEO of your company, then you might want to do something, a combination of plan and execute or a React and stuff like that. So in our case, we're going to use a tools agent and we're going to define the prompt. And here's the prompt. Again, it has to be an expression. I'm going to go open this and you can see that you are a helpful assistant designed to answer questions from a YouTube transcript stored in a vector database. I am saying this agent, look, I already have YouTube transcripts, which is through the other workflow. So you're an agent who's just designed to answer questions from the transcript, right? Retrieve relevant information from the transcripts and provide a concise, accurate, informative response. Use the tool called YouTube Transcripts tool. So what is a tool? A tool is basically access to the database in this case, right? It could be a software or it could be anything in different cases. So in this case, it's access to a database, and that data tool is basically connected over here. So I have a vector store tool, and like I'm going to go into what these are, but this is what a tool is. So I'm saying, look, here's a tool that I have. Use the tool called YouTube Transcripts tool to retrieve any information from the store database. So I'm saying, look, you have this database available and it's called YouTube Transcripts tool. Use that to retrieve it. If the answer cannot be found in the stored transcripts, respond with I cannot find the answer in the available resource. So in this case, I put all the entire prompt in the user prompt, but this is not the best approach. So I could just remove this right over here and I can add a system prompt, and within the system prompt, I will paste it over here, right? So this is how you would have to write it, because when you see in the logs, you can see that the input, the AI agent, this part is just it talking to the memory. I'm going to touch on this. But if you see in the system message, it still goes and says you are a helpful assistant. And then in the human message says you are a helpful assistant designed to answer questions. So the system message is a default one. So it's better to put the system message where it belongs. So this was something that I noticed right now that I had written it incorrectly, but this is how you would do it. So in the prompt, in the user message, you say you pass the direct message from Telegram. So if it's an expression view, I would say here's the question, and from this window I would select the message from Telegram. So here was the message right here. The message was somewhere over here. Okay, the message is not here. You can go select the Telegram trigger and just drag this text and drop it over here, and that will basically give you your Telegram agent, right? So this is the AI agent. What is this? It's the answering agent, right? And I'm going to rename this. So what does this AI agent have access to, right? So it has the chat model. Of course, it needs to use a chat model to answer your question. It has a buffer memory. So this buffer memory is required for it to store all of this prompt, all the responses from the database until it sends it to you, until the execution is over. The buffer memory stores all these values. And even after the execution is over, N8 keeps storing all these values inside executions. So that's what uses up your memory space within Railway. So you have to connect a little memory. There are different kinds of memory. You can just, if you click here, let me remove this for now. And when I click here, you can see there's a simple memory. This is what I created, window buffer memory. For most cases, simple memory is just enough. Postgres chat memory will store all this in a database. In a Postgres database, that will have a little more permanent access for you if you're, let's say, having a chat history conversation with AI. So for most cases, we're just going to use a simple buffer memory. So vector store tool. So what is this vector store tool? A vector store tool is basically a tool that has access to your database. So it acts like the interface between your AI and your database. So you give a name for the tool, you say YouTube Transcripts tool, and whatever tool you use here, you have to reference it in the prompt as with this exact tool description, a tool name. And you have to give a very clear description for AI to know what this tool exactly does. So this key description and name is super important for you to think of carefully, because this is how AI understands what is available with it, right? If you give a different name to this, it won't work. If you give a very incorrect description to it, sometimes it will hallucinate. So you have to make sure the data name is the same as the name inside your AI agent, right? So this tool is basically your interface for your AI to access your, as the name suggests, a tool to access your database. Speaking of the database, this itself is the database. So I'm going to show you how to set up a Pinecone database. Pinecone is another third-party tool with which we are setting up a database. So if you go and select the vector store from the vector store, you can see that it's called a vector store. Just click on this thing when it's not connected and open and look for Pinecone, and you will see Pinecone vector store. And let me show you how to do this. So if I go to pinecone.io and I'm going to log in, so you have this thing called indexes. So indexes are kind of like your tables or like your storage mediums or storage boxes, right? So each index is where you're going to store your data in a vector format. So you can create a new index, and within an index, you can just give a name, whatever, Hormozy testbot. And in configurations, you have a ton of configurations. So what this configuration is basically the logic with which your raw data is transformed into a vector data. So this vector data is what is stored in this database. It's a vector database. So vector databases are the most effective databases to work with AI agents. So you need to convert the raw data into a format that your AI agents can easily talk to and retrieve information. Otherwise, it will take much longer, and you need to use something like an SQL and store it in a different kind of database. AI doesn't work with that interfaces. So this is the fastest medium to transfer information between your database and your AI. And this is the algorithm with which it transforms that data. So one thing you have to remember is whatever you select here, I'm saying text embedding 3 small. This is the selection that I make. I also have to select the same thing over here. So within the vector database, I have to select an embedding and make sure the embedding is the OpenAI embedding. So I'm selecting OpenAI. If you select a different one, just make sure it's the same thing selected. And in the cloud provider, you can keep the defaults and just go say create index. I already have an index, so I'm going to open my Hormozy bot. And as you can see, I have 313 records, and all this data that I stored from the YouTube video is stored here. As you can see, they are stored in different chunks. So there are different scores you can see, and the scoring is something that is a little more technical in terms of how it manages. But this is basically the same YouTube transcript, but converted into different chunks, and it's stored in the database. So when you ask a certain question, it will, using keywords, it will fetch all the different responses from this database that maps to the vector, right? So based on your keyword will be turned into a vector, and that vector will be matched to the vector, will be queried to the database, and it will return a bunch of text, and that bunch of text will be your response, right? Your bunch of text, it will return a bunch of vectors that will again be converted into text, and that will be your response. Okay, so this was the embedding, and then finally you have another model for retrieval. So again, it's just another setting that you need to do for it to work properly. So once you have all of this set up, again, here there is not a lot of setting. Just select your Gemini 2.0. I'm going to 2.0 Flash, and that's it. So once you have that selected, make sure the tool is the same, and that's it. Just go and save. So what this does is, if you can see the output log, you can see the step-by-step sequence of what it did. So first I said it went into the buffer memory, which is it went into this, and it stored the prompt. So it stored this input. So it said this is the action. It says load memory variables. This is what it wanted to do, and the values are here is the prompt. So is the input. You are a helpful assistant and blah, 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 and your information about transcripts using the tool, whatever prompt you said. And system message is you're a helpful assistant. Obviously this is wrong. We just fixed it right now. And for the formatting instructions, of course, this is all part of the prompt. And the output from the buffer memory is just like, yeah, okay, cool. We have loaded all the variables. We've loaded this information. I'm ready to receive any output from the AI agent. So there's actually not really an output, right? Then it goes into the Gemini chat model, which is this, and it says, hey, you are a helpful assistant. Again, the same prompt. This is the whole thing is prompt. And the output, there's nothing, right? It doesn't send anything yet. It just says the question. And then this chat model decides to go to the vector store, and then it sends this input. So it says, here's a query. How do I get ahead of 99% of people? Which is, it extracted the query from the prompt and it said, look, this is the query, and it's sending this input. The AI agent decides that this is the input it needs to send to the vector database. And the output of the vector database is basically this text, right? So the vector database looks up the database, it just queries this exact question, and then the database gets all the related blocks of text that has a vector relevance to this. So it matches the text that we are asking and has a similarity score in terms of what would be the most accurate response to this question from the database, and then it sends those values back. So this whole thing is happening in one step. But if you look the inner workings of this step itself, so it says, okay, it sends a query and it sends a k value of 4. K value is like the number of responses it needs back. And the output, it looks like it sends you 4 blobs of data. And like, yeah, it sends along with it some metadata and ID and so on. And the embeddings OpenAI is how it vectorizes it. See, as you can see, this is how all the vectors look like. It's just a bunch of numbers. And the Gemini model, it takes that, again, same input, and it takes that output that was received and it summarizes the output and sends it back to the AI agent. And finally, the AI agent, using that final output, it turns this output into a single statement that can be sent back to the user, and it is again gone and stored in the buffer memory. So this is how the whole sequence works. And once that answer is given back, it is gone and sent back to the user, and it says, okay, so here we changed some things, that's why you see it is red. So you can just like see that the output is available over here from the answering agent, and you just take that output and you just put it as a text in the Telegram reply to user node, and as a user I get the response back. Okay, so that's how you do the answering agent. Now let's go into the transcription agent. So for the transcription agent, now again going back to the if statement, so we detect that the input is a URL. So you can see that in the message, we are sending a message back to Telegram saying, hey, we are processing a video, please give a few minutes, right? So it's just a status update. We spoke about this, it's the same as the one below. And here we are generating a video ID. So why are we doing this, right? So I have a folder in my Google Drive called Hormozy bot. And as you can see, a bunch of text over here, each of them are IDs of the YouTube video. So every time I place a new YouTube video, I don't want the same YouTube video to be transcribed twice and stored in the database. So I want to check the ID first if those IDs exist over here, and I will only go transcribe those IDs that don't exist here. So, and also it's a great way for me to double check what's inside this transcript. As you can see, there's like a whole big transcript that is actual plain English that is stored, right? Going back, so what I'm doing is I'm generating an ID, and to generate this ID, what I have is my input here is basically the URL, the complete URL. The output is I just want the ID, right? So I could do this easily by going into ChatGPT, and then I can say, write a JavaScript to find the YouTube ID from any kind of YouTube URL. Right? So I just want to find the ID, return in the format accepted by N8N. So the second line is important for you to note because that's how n8n expects any return from JavaScript to be. So when you do that, you can see that, okay, it's sending me two options. So it'll throw something like this. So you can just copy the whole thing, and you can see that in the comment here, YouTube URL from incoming n8n item is the json.url, right? So the JSON is the previous JSON, but we need to see if it has the URL. So going back, so if you see here, if you paste this here, it does regex matching. So this code might be different because I generated earlier. So as you can see, the URL is $if URL. So what does this $if means? It comes from this if statement. So it comes from the $if statement's output, and .first refers to the first output from that node, and it has a JSON, and that JSON has a message, and the message has a text, and that text, because the text is what comes from Telegram, which is the URL. So you don't have to remember this. What you would do is, if I go into one of the past executions and open this, so let me open something that transcribed recently. There you go. So if I open this and if I click here, you can see that the whole thing from Telegram, all the data from Telegram comes here. So if I go into Telegram trigger, I know that the input is a text. So I just drag this text and drop it over here, and that will generate this thing for you. So you don't have to manually type it. So you can just drag from the schema and just drop it. Now I'm not able to drag because it's a past execution. Okay, so now I have the video URL. What I'm doing here is make sure, to do this, what is this node? This node is basically your code node. So if you click on this code node, it can run any custom JavaScript or Python code. So when I complete running this, it'll give you a video ID that looks something like this. So this is a video ID, and the video ID is basically the ID that this JavaScript code returns. So it gives me in this format. It's a JSON, and then there's a video ID. So with this video ID, what I'm doing is taking that ID and I am searching in my Google Drive. So I can open this by click here and say Google Drive. There you go. And once I have this drive, I need to select search files and folders. So once you're here, select your Google Drive credential. Remember, this Google Drive credential is not the same as your Google Studio credential, which you use for your AI. This Google Drive credential is the API key that you need to get from your Google Drive. So it will be inside Google Cloud. So you can do this easily by saying create new credential and select OAuth2 service, and you have an OAuth2 redirect URL, and you need a client ID and a secret, right? So you have to go into Google Cloud Console. So once I'm in Google Cloud Console, you need to create a new project over here, right? So I can go and select a new project, and I can say n8n3 and just say create. So once I've created this project, let's wait for it to complete. So I'm creating a new project for you from scratch. And once I've opened this project, the first thing you need to do is to go and configure the screen. So let me click on next, and then I will just call it n8n and just click on next. Just select email and select this as external because you want this to be accessed by everyone else and not just your organization. I have an organization suite account, so if you have something else, that's fine too. Purchases@gmail.com. I'm just going to give another contact information and agree and create. Okay, so now that I've created this, what I have to do is let's go and create an OAuth client, and I will use the client ID as a web application and just call it web client 1. You can have different clients, one for each platform. And then in the redirect URL, just make sure you copy the redirect URL, just copy that and go back here and just paste it over here and just say create. And then you have a client ID and client secret. You can just copy the client ID from here and just go paste your client ID here. Again, copy the client secret and go paste the client secret over here and just hit on save. And finally, you need to also sign in with Google. Let's see if it works. It might throw an error. There you go. So once you're here, just sign in with the email address with you selected, and it will basically sign in. I'm not going to do that because I already have an account. So that's pretty much it. So I'm going to delete the second one and keep my first one. Okay, so there's one more thing you have to ensure you need to do for this to work is go into your navigation menu, go into APIs and services and say and enable APIs and services. So click your enable API and services over here and search for Google Drive API because you want to enable the Drive API. So go here and make sure you enable this. If you don't enable it, it won't work. You also need to do the same for Google Docs API because we are also using Google Docs at some point. So depending on which API you want, just go and enable or disable those. Okay, so now that I have my Google Drive thing, what I'm doing is I'm saying select my Google Drive account. I want a file or folder that you need to search for. You need to look for a file or folder. The operation is a search operation, search file or folder name. And then in the search query, I'm obviously giving the search query, which is the video ID that I just created in the previous node using JavaScript. So as you can see, the video ID is passed over here. You can see the value right below. Again, I would do the same dragging and dropping over here. And I'm selecting the folder. So I don't want to search the video ID in everywhere in my drive, which you could do too. So I'm saying specifically look for my folder, and I can just drop down from this list and I can actually select my folder. And then when you open it, you will see all your folders right from there for you to just simple select. If it is not, what you can do is go open this link and check your URL. In the URL, you'll see this long ID. You can just copy that ID and just go here and say expression and select this by ID, not by URL, and just paste that ID. And it knows exactly which folder to use. So now what we're doing is we're searching for this thing, right? So obviously, at this point of time, the video didn't exist. So it returned an empty array, right? It turned something empty. So when it returns empty, obviously the false is true, right? So if it is true, which means it already exists, now I just send a message back to the user saying this video already exists in the database because we don't want to keep storing the same thing. So when it's false, now I'm using what is this like world-like thing? So it's basically an HTTP node. So I'm gonna go for HTTP. So what an HTTP does is it just basically talks to an external service that does some actions for you, right? So in this case, we are transcribing the YouTube video through a service called superdata.ai. So let me open superdata. So as you can see, what it does is it uses web and YouTube to text API for makers, right? So just sign in and create an account. And what that'll do is it'll give you some free stuff. Once you've logged in, you'll see a dashboard, and within the dashboard, just click on this free thing. And when you're here, you can just copy this key. Just click on this key and then just copy it. And once you've clicked on this, you can go back into your Hormozy bot. Okay, so now what you can do is just go into the transcript endpoint. So let's access the documentation, right? So if you go click on YouTube and transcript, that's what we wanted. It's still loading. Okay, so you can see that it gives you this like little curl statement. So you can just copy this curl statement and you can go here and let me add this HTTP node again. So once I'm in this node, I can say import CURL and just paste this whole thing over here. And when I import it, what it'll do is it'll go pre-fill all this data that you need. The only thing you need to do is paste your API key, which we copied earlier. So you would paste your API key over here. And basically one more thing you need to do is, as you can see in the CURL, the YouTube video link is already over here, right? So this is a random YouTube video. We don't want this YouTube video. So let's expand this. So what you would be doing is instead of you just copy this whole thing before the ampersand, right? So the ampersand is sort of like the breakpoint. So this, what this text is equal to true is saying is like, return me just the text without timestamps and stuff. So you can see those in the properties and documentation. So we just need to copy this part. Anything after ampersand symbol is the next property. So anything before it is the whole URL. So let's just delete it. And over here, you can just drag your URL or the text from your Telegram and then drop it over here. And that will become a dynamic value. So that's exactly what we're doing here. See, if you open this, as you can see, the URL is over here. Why is text true not as a URL? It's as a separate parameter over here. So see, as a query parameter, text is true. You can represent it both ways. You can write text is true as a query parameter, or you can write it in the URL as ampersand text equal to true. Both are fine. It's just the same thing. And for the request, you need to send a GET request, and that's specified in the documentation in Superdata, right? So you have all these stuff. Again, the API key is something I pasted from Superdata. So once I do that, as you can see that it gives me, for the languages I ask, it gives me the whole transcript. So behind the scenes, Superdata uses some AI crawling and converting voice to text. I'm not sure, but what it does is it gives me this kind of text that has all these commas. It's not really like formatted for clear sentences for readability, right? So we need to clean up this data. So we have the transcript. This is itself pretty big because we need the transcript to store it in the database. So that's what this AI agent does. So in this AI agent, what I'm doing is, again, this AI agent I'm connecting to a simple memory and Google. And to this, the prompt that I'm saying is, you are an AI agent tasked with cleaning up a transcript by removing unwanted commas and turning it into proper sentences. Your goal is to improve readability while ensuring information is lost from the original. And here's a transcript, and then follow these steps to clean up the transcript, right? So I'm giving the prompt to say, look, just go take this transcript and then like read through the entire transcript, remove all the commas, create proper sentences, maintain all original information, don't like change anything, preserve the content structure and flow, ensuring that the meaning is intact. After processing the transcript, use the tool with description tool to send messages in Telegram to update the user on the progress. If I connect a Telegram tool, in this case, I have not connected a Telegram tool, so I can actually remove this part. But what I'm saying is, look, you can send a message back to the user. If I've connected Telegram, send a reply as a tool to update the user on the progress. And I'm saying continue processing the remaining text and following the same guidelines. And once you've finished cleaning up the entire transcript, present the revised text as a single continuous paragraph without any special formatting. So how did I come up with this prompt, right? So that's the big question. I use this tool from Anthropic called generate a prompt. So you can go to console.anthropic.com and go to generate a prompt, and here you can describe exactly what you want in your own plain language. I have a bunch of YouTube transcripts that I want to clean up and remove all the commas, right? Here's how the transcript might look like, and then paste your example here. And if you wanted even better results, here's what the output should look like. And then just clean that up yourself manually once and just paste the output, or clean it up on ChatGPT and paste that output if you're happy with it, or you just don't need this, and it will figure out. So once you do this, it will generate a prompt with the right structure, but it's not the best, but it's a great start instead of writing it manually. So let's go and actually clean up the prompt now that we are here. So I'm going to go into transcript cleanup prompt. As you see, everything is in the prompt message. I built this pretty quickly. So I'm going to copy this whole thing, and I'm going to go into this, and I'm going to paste it over here. Let me click on expression so I can expand this. And over here, I don't need this part. Let's see. You're an AI assistant tasked with cleaning up transcript. Follow these steps, read through the entire transcript, understand remove all the commas, create proper sentences by capitalizing first, adding approximate punctuations, using grammatical, maintain the original information including names, specific terms, maintain the overall structure and flow of the content, ensuring meaning. After processing the transcript, use the tool. This we don't need, so let's remove that. And then we will make this the sixth step. Right? And once you're finished cleaning up the entire transcript, present the same guidelines, and remember your primary goal is to improve the readability. So that's it. So now for the prompt, I'll remove everything else. We just need to send the user message. There you go. And that would go and clean things up. So I'm going to go into my executions and I'm going to see this execution again for me to show you. Okay, so it went and cleaned things up. You can also give a very specific format, but for me, I just wanted to send the plain output. So it gave me the entire cleaned up transcription without the commas, and like in some cases, the context window is really high. So in this case, it's best to pick a Google Gemini because Google's context window is very high. And what we can do is just get this thing, and I want to touch upon like what this one item and two items are, right? So here it just goes and receives back like this one chunk. So it sends a chunk to the chat model and then it gets back one chunk. So that's just this one item transmitting. Here it's two because it's talking to the memory twice. So probably once for the prompt and once for the response. So it decides how many times to talk to each, and every time it talks to a chat model, of course you're incurring a cost. It's like using ChatGPT once each time. So your AI agent decides how often it needs to talk. But the interesting thing is you have control over how often it needs to talk by how you write your prompt. And if you say that you talk to your chat model only once, and in that once do these steps, it will only do those steps. So you have control over how it talks to your AI agent, talks to your model based on how well you write a prompt. Okay, so now what we want to do is we have a clean transcript. So every time I want to generate a quote and send it on Telegram on autopilot on every 1 hour that I just told you, what I'm actually doing is I'm using keywords and I'm searching it through keywords. So where will I get those keywords? I need to generate those keywords first. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm taking the transcript and using another AI model and I'm saying your job is to create a list of keywords, right? So I took the transcript and I pasted this transcript in the prompt, as you can see, and it generated all these keywords for me. I made the same cleaning up issue over here. Let me go and fix that. So I'm going to go option, create a system message, copy this, go back into this one and go into the expression, go and paste this. And as you can see, you're tasked with generating a set of keywords. Here's the transcript. The transcript we want to pass in the user message. To complete the task, carefully read, identify the main topics for each create a short description, a keyword or a phrase, 1 to 5 words that encapsulate the idea, compile the list in keywords, 10 to 15 items that best represent the content of the transcript, present your list of keywords in the following order, and additional guidelines. Ensure each keyword is unique and non-redundant if the concept is particularly important. So again, I didn't write all of this. I generated it using Claude and then I modified it. So I can go back here and just let me adjust the user message too, and I will just pass the transcription and yeah, and I'm going to save it. And what that does is exactly it will go and create certain keywords that looks like this. These are different keywords that it created: customers value 1 benefit. And it now what I'm doing is I'm using a Google Doc operation. So again, you can just go here and say doc, right? Google Docs. And within Docs, I'm creating a document first. Or no, I'm updating a document because I already created a document manually. And every time I can generate a new video transcript, I generate a new set of keywords and then I update my document. So there's just like one huge set of keyword document that keeps piling up. So I have like a whole set of keywords. So with those keywords, I can now query it to my main transcript database and then pull in some information related to that keyword and then generate the code at the end, right? So that's how I'm using it. Okay, so took the keywords generator. I said, okay, take this document. So this ID is the ID of the document. And I'm saying update this document and I'm putting in the actions. I'm selecting what do I have to update with. Text, action is insert a body, insert at the body, insert at the specific location, which is at the end of the body, and let's just drag this output and put it, right? So I'm saying, look, append all this input into the Google Doc, and what that will give me is a Google document ID that looks like this. So it's the ID of the document, the keywords document, right? So now what is this mapped fields? So map fields is just, as you can see, it gives me this, like, if I go here, it gives me this like strange schema. So I want to clean this up and I want that data to only be the ones that I need. So I can click on this map fields as another node. You can easily access it by going back here and say map fields, edit fields. Yeah, this is the one. You select that, and what you're doing is fields to set. So I want to set, let me go here and show you edit fields options. So I'm going to do manual mapping, right? And I'm going to say name is Google Doc ID. I can write any name, the name identifier with which I want to reference this value, right? So I'm saying Google Doc ID, and I'm passing the ID that came from the previous node. And Telegram chat ID, I'm taking it from the first node with which I had a chat ID because I want to send a message back to the Telegram chat, the exact same chat. And Google file name ID, that just came from this one, the generate video ID, right? Because that's the file name. And why do I need this? Again, to reference it just in case. So with all of that, I'm saying go execute another workflow. So you can do that easily by just going here and just say execute and say execute sub workflow. So you can go back into your home page and see all the different workflows. And the second workflow that I'm executing actually is this part. So as you can see, it's inactive right now, but it doesn't have to be active. So because it is triggered by another workflow, as you can see, it doesn't have to be activated. So now there's a receiver in this workflow that says when executed by another workflow, it goes through this process. And over here, I'm using the Google Drive node, and the resource is file and operation is download, and I'm taking the ID. So I'm basically downloading that file from Google Drive using the GDoc ID that I just created from the previous one. If you remember, I mapped the field and I called it GDoc ID, and I'm using the exact same GDoc ID, and $JSON will be always the value over here. So this part is something that you need to kind of know, that $JSON is always the first value. And after map fields, when you have execute workflow, it always takes the whole mapped input that you send. See this mapped input, GDoc ID, Telegram ID. This will be the data, only this data, the last one will be available in your next workflow. Everything else will be lost. So you have to make sure that data is available over here, and it downloads the files from Google, and it goes to the Pinecone vector, which is of course what I'm doing is like, now I have the transcript, I need to go store it in the database. So I am taking that file, I'm downloading it again. So I'm just keeping it clean in different workflows. And then I'm going to the Pinecone database and I'm saying insert documents, and I'm selecting the Pinecone index. So if you select down here, and you can select all the different indexes. And within this index, I'm going and connecting the same embedding model that I configured when I created my index, the same default data loader. And yeah, so this is the data loader, and text splitter is how you configure what the chunk size is. So if you see this recursive character splitter, you can see that it has 100,000 of chunk size and 100 of overlap, which means each chunk has a slight overlap so that it knows if to retrieve the next chunk or not, or is the context over, right? So you just got to add a text splitter, add a default data loader. Again, it comes default. So just connect these two and finally send an update back to Telegram saying, hey, your video is now stored in the database. That's exactly what happened when I sent a message. So it went to processing the video, it completed the transcription, and it says your video is now stored in the database. Okay, now the automation part. So the automation part is basically this part, the reminder automation, right? So this is the part that triggers every 1 hour. So as you can see, if I go back into my editor, I can have a schedule trigger, and the schedule trigger is configured for running every hour, and the hours between trigger is just 1 hour between trigger, right? So what I'm doing here is every hour this will run. So the schedule trigger will, once you make it active, it will run every hour non-stop until you make it inactive, right? So what it does is it goes, and let me go to a executed one. As you can see, at 8 p.m. it ran an automation, right? So this little thing is a test execution. So at 8 p.m. the schedule trigger got activated. It got all the keywords from this document. How did it know the keywords? The document ID, I manually put it because I know it is in my drive. So I put the document ID. So what it did was it got all the keywords. Then it went and queried the agent. So this is a tools agent, and this tools agent has a vector store connected to it, the same way we saw earlier in terms of querying, asking a question. Same process. It has a vector store, and it has this tool is called Hormozy Transcripts tool, and basically the prompt goes something like this, right? Here's a list of keywords that you will choose from, and here's the keyword, and in the system message it says that you are an agent tasked with selecting an insightful quote from Alex Hormozy's advice, and then please follow the steps. This stored all the keywords, randomly select a keyword from the list, use this tool to query the vector database with chosen keyword, then analyze the return segments to find a quote that meets the following criteria. If a quote is found, output only the quote without any additional formatting. If no quote is found, pick a different keyword and try again. Your output should be the quote and do not have any trailing text. So sometimes it gives you like, oh, here's the final output from this. We don't want all of that. And then when you receive the quote, matches the criteria, complete the execution. This last part is also important because sometimes what it does is it hallucinates and it keeps going back to the chat model. It would have finished the execution, but it wouldn't know that it's complete, and it would go and talk to the database again and pull more data. You have to be very specific and very clear with your instructions. And when you see it hallucinating, then you understand why it hallucinates and just include that in your prompt. It's as simple as that. And if you see the logs, so first, it spoke to my buffer memory and it said, look, this is the action and here's the input. So it sent all the transcript that I have, the set of keywords that I have, and it said, okay, look, these are all the keywords, list of keywords. Now you're going to select a random keyword and all of that prompt that I just read, right? So once I did that, it stored in the memory and it sent the same thing to Google Gemini. And this model said, okay, I have a list of keywords. I will randomly select one. The randomly selected keyword is hard work is the goal. So Gemini selected this keyword, and now it said, now I will use the Hormozy Transcripts tool to query. So exactly as I described. So then it goes to the vector tool, and then it sends this query saying hard work is the goal. And the response from the vector tool looks something like this. So of course you can see the inner working over here. And over here, finally, the thing, you're an AI agent tasked at selecting an insightful quote. Again, the first prompt, now it gives some additional context. So now we have the keywords, and then now here's the final function call output, and then this is what the tool sent me. And now the agent understands, okay, so now we are in not the first step, but in the third step. So with all of this information, it understands how the steps have increased. And now it says, okay, for the output, for the speaker work, so it creates the final quote that is stored back into the memory and sent back to the message. And for the message, you obviously need the chat ID, and the chat ID also I manually typed in because that's from which I am sending the message, and I always want it to be sent to my chat ID. So now this just sends me the quote, and when that does, I will see the quote over here. That's the whole process. If you want to try this yourself, with this video, you will find a link to this JSON that you can just copy. Feel free to modify it. You might want to make some changes in terms of creating your own index, creating your API key, creating your own Google Drive, and all the other keys that you need to make this work. And feel free to change it as you will. Connect to WhatsApp, connect to a different trigger, or the concepts that you learn from here is how you would be building incrementally in any use case that you want. I hope this was helpful. This was a long video, but this is going to be a very cool thing to learn about for building for AI. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.